The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Inside the ship, beings from many different worlds worked together to prepare for something that had never happened before. Today, they would meet the humans for the first time. Dr. Zara Vexithani stood in her small room, looking at herself in the mirror. Her skin was like crystal, clear and bright with lines that caught the light in pretty ways. Her people, the Kepler, were known across the galaxy for being smart and for looking nice. Other alien species often said the Kepler were beautiful in their own special way. Zara touched the datapad in her hands. She had spent months learning about humans. They were new to space travel. They came from a small blue planet called Earth, far away from the busy center of the galaxy. The reports about humans were strange. They were said to be very emotional and hard to understand. Most aliens thought emotions were useful tools, but humans seemed to let their feelings control them. The door to her room made a soft sound. "Dr. Vexithani, it is time," said a voice from the speaker. Zara walked through the long halls of the ship. Other aliens moved past her, some tall and thin, others short and round, some covered in fur, others with scales. All of them were going to the same place, the meeting room where they would see humans for the first time. The meeting room was large and white. Chairs were arranged in a circle so that everyone could see each other. Zara sat with the other scientists and diplomats. Her crystal skin caught the bright lights and made small rainbows on the walls. The main door opened with a hiss. 3 humans walked in. Zara had seen pictures of humans before, but seeing them in person was different. They looked so soft compared to the hard crystal of her own people. Their skin was smooth and came in different colors, brown, pink, and tan. They had hair on their heads that moved when they walked. Their eyes were small compared to hers, but they seemed to look at everything with great interest. The human in front was a man named James Chen. He was the leader of their group. He smiled, something humans did with their mouths to show they were happy or friendly. Most aliens found human smiles strange because they showed teeth, which usually meant danger in other species. "Hello, everyone," James said in a warm voice. "Thank you for welcoming us today," the other aliens whispered to each other. James was supposed to use the formal greeting that all species used when meeting for the first time. Instead, he talked like he was meeting old friends. Ambassador Kreltos, a tall blue being with 4 arms, stood up. "Human James Chen, we welcome you according to Protocol 7 of the Galactic Council. Please state your species goals for this meeting." James looked around the room, making eye contact with different aliens. This was wrong. Direct eye contact was considered rude and aggressive by most species. But James did not seem to know this, or if he did know, he did not care. "Our goal is simple," James said. "We want to learn about all of you. We want to be friends. We want to share our world with you and learn about your worlds." More whispers filled the room. Friendship was not a diplomatic goal that most species understood. Trade agreements, defense pacts, and resource sharing, these were normal goals. But friendship? Dr. Vexithani watched James carefully. When he spoke, his face changed to show what he was feeling. When he smiled, the skin around his eyes wrinkled in a way that seemed to make the smile more real. When he looked serious, his eyebrows moved closer together. The Kepler did not show emotions on their faces like this. "Dr. Vexithani," Ambassador Kreltos said, "please present the standard genetic compatibility data." Zara stood up and activated a large screen. Charts and numbers filled the air in front of them. "These are the genetic profiles of all council species," she said in her formal voice. "They show which species can live on which planets, what foods are safe to eat, and what environmental conditions each species needs." She looked at James to see if he was paying attention to the important information. Instead of looking at the charts, he was looking at her. When their eyes met, he smiled again. "Dr. Vexithani," James said, "what is your home planet like? Does it have sunsets?" Zara stopped talking. This was not the right question. He should be asking about population sizes, resource availability, or military strength. Yes, we have sunsets. Why do you ask about this?" "Because sunsets are beautiful," James said. "I love watching them on Earth. The sky turns all different colors, orange, pink, purple, sometimes red. It happens every day, but it's always a little different. I was wondering what sunsets look like on other worlds." The room was very quiet. No one had ever asked Dr. Vexithani about sunsets before. No one had ever asked her if something was beautiful just because they wanted to know. "On Kepler Prime," she said slowly, "sunsets they are silver and blue, The light reflects off the crystal formations and makes patterns in the sky. That sounds amazing, James said, and his eyes lit up with real interest. I would love to see that someday. Ambassador Kreltos made a noise that meant he was not happy. Human James Chen, we must discuss trade possibilities and defense agreements. Personal interests are not part of these meetings. I'm sorry, James said, but he did not look sorry. Where I come from, getting to know someone is the first step to any good relationship, whether it's trade or defense or anything else. Dr. Vexithani sat down, feeling confused. In all her years of diplomatic work, no one had asked her about sunsets. No one had asked her what she thought was beautiful. No one had looked at her like she was interesting just for being herself. The meeting continued, but Zara found it hard to focus on the formal discussions. She kept thinking about the way James had asked about sunsets. She kept thinking about the word beautiful and how he had said it like it was important. The other aliens talked about trade routes and mining rights. James and his team tried to follow the formal discussions, but they kept asking strange questions. They wanted to know about art and music and stories. They wanted to know what made each species happy. They wanted to know about families and homes and dreams. Most of the aliens thought these questions were a waste of time, but Dr. Vexthani found herself wanting to answer them. She wanted to tell James about the crystal gardens on her world where the plants sang in the wind. She wanted to describe the way her people danced during their celebrations, their crystal bodies making music as they moved. But those were not diplomatic topics. Those were personal things, and Dr. Vexithani had been taught that personal things did not matter in important meetings. When the meeting ended, James walked over to her. Dr. Vexithani, thank you for telling me about your sunsets. I hope we can talk more about your world sometime. Why? She asked before she could stop herself. James looked surprised by the question. Because it's fascinating. Because you're fascinating. Because I think every world and every person has something beautiful about them, and I want to learn what that is. After the humans left, Dr. Vexithani stood alone in the meeting room. The other aliens were talking about how strange the humans were, how emotional and unpredictable, but all she could think about was the way James had looked at her when she talked about silver and blue sunsets. He had looked at her like she was not just a collection of useful facts and skills. He had looked at her like she was a person worth knowing. For the first time in her life, Dr. Vexithani wondered what it would be like to be seen as beautiful, not just efficient. She wondered what it would be like to be valued for who she was, not just what she could do. The humans had been on the ship for only a few hours, but already they were making her think about things she had never considered before. The crystal patterns on her skin flickered slightly, responding to emotions she did not fully understand. Tomorrow there would be more meetings. Tomorrow she would have to try to understand these strange warm creatures called humans, and despite what her training told her about staying professional and distant, she found herself looking forward to it. 3 days had passed since the first meeting with the humans. Dr. Zara Vexithani found herself assigned as the official cultural liaison to the human delegation. When Ambassador Kreltos told her about this assignment, he did not look happy. Consider this a learning experience, he had said in his formal way. The humans clearly need guidance to understand proper galactic customs. Perhaps you can teach them to be more appropriate. Zara knew this assignment was not good for her career. Cultural liaison was usually given to junior diplomats or those who had made mistakes. Important scientists like her were supposed to work on trade agreements and technology sharing, not babysit emotional aliens who asked about sunsets. But as she walked to meet James and his team for their second day of cultural exchange, she realized she was not upset about the assignment. She was curious. The humans had been given quarters in Section C of the ship near the gardens. When Zara arrived, she found them sitting in a circle on the floor of their meeting room. They were not looking at data pads or studying reports. They were just talking to each other and laughing. Laughing was something humans did when they found things funny or enjoyable. It made a sound that was loud and rhythmic. Most aliens found human laughter disturbing, because it sounded like the warning calls that many species made when they were in danger. Dr. Vexithani. James stood up when he saw her. Please join us. We were just sharing stories about our home planets. Stories? Zara asked. Do you mean historical data? Not exactly, said Sarah Kim, one of the other humans. We were telling each other about our favorite memories from Earth. James was telling us about the time he got lost in a forest and found a hidden waterfall. Zara looked confused. Why would you share data about being lost? That suggests poor navigation skills. The humans looked at each other and smiled. It's not about the navigation, James explained. It's about the feeling of discovery. The surprise of finding something beautiful when you weren't looking for it. The way the water looked like silver ribbons falling from the rocks. Silver ribbons, Zara repeated slowly, like poetry. Exactly like poetry, James said, and his smile got bigger. Dr. Vexthani, would you tell us a story about your world? Not a report or data, just something you remember that made you feel good. Zara sat down carefully. Her crystal body did not bend the same way human bodies did, so she had to arrange herself differently. The humans watched her with interest, but not rudeness. They seemed to think her different way of sitting was normal and acceptable. I am not sure I understand what kind of story you want, she said. Tell us about a moment that made you happy, suggested Maria Santos, the third human. Maybe something from when you were young? Zara thought for a long moment. Happy was not a word her people used very often. They talked about efficiency and success and optimal outcomes. But as she thought about her childhood, one memory came to her mind. When I was young, she began slowly. I lived near the crystal caves on Kepler Prime. Sometimes, when the twin suns were in the right position, light would shine into the caves and make the walls glow with many colors. The crystals would sing. They make sound when light hits them at certain angles. The humans leaned forward, listening carefully. One day I was studying for my efficiency tests, and I heard the crystals singing louder than usual. I left my studies and went to the caves. The light was perfect that day, and the whole cave system was filled with music and colors. I stayed there for hours just listening and watching. That sounds incredible, James said softly. How did it make you feel? Feel? Zara hesitated. I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself, like I was connected to my world in a way that had nothing to do with my work or my studies. She searched for the right word. It was beautiful. The humans were quiet for a moment, but it was a good kind of quiet. They looked like they understood exactly what she meant. Did you get in trouble for missing your studies? Sarah asked. Yes, Zara admitted. My teachers said I had wasted valuable time. They said beauty was inefficient and that I should focus on useful activities. That's sad, Maria said. Beauty isn't inefficient. It's what makes life worth living, Zara stared at her. No one had ever said anything like that before. In Kepler society, life was worth living because you could contribute to the success of your people. Beauty was nice, but it was not necessary. Tell us more about the crystal caves, James said. Do you still visit them? No, Zara said. I have not been back since I became a scientist. My work is too important. Maybe you could go back someday, James suggested. After we finish all this diplomatic stuff? The idea had never occurred to her. Going back to the caves would serve no purpose except to make her happy. But the way James said it made it sound like making herself happy was a good enough reason. They spent the rest of the morning sharing stories. The humans told her about Earth's oceans and mountains and forests. They described snow and rain and the way flowers smelled in spring. They talked about music and art and food like these things were as important as technology and defense systems. Zara found herself telling them about things she had not thought about in years. She described the way her people's crystal cities looked at dawn, with light bouncing between the buildings like a game. She told them about the ceremonial dances her people did during festivals, and how the sound of crystal bodies moving together created its own music. Your people sound amazing, James said. I hope we can visit your world someday. Why would you want to visit? Zara asked. We do not have anything your species needs. Our technology is different from yours and our resources would not be useful to humans. Because it's beautiful, James said simply. Because you're proud of it. Because it's part of who you are. That afternoon, Ambassador Kreltos called Zara to his office. How are the humans progressing in their cultural education? He asked. They are unusual, Zara said carefully. They ask many questions that do not seem related to diplomatic protocols. Such as, they want to know about personal experiences. They ask about emotions and memories. They seem to think these things are important. Ambassador Kreltos made a disapproving sound. Emotions are tools for decision-making, nothing more. These humans seem to let their emotions control them instead of the other way around. This is why they will never be as successful as more advanced species. Zara nodded, But she was thinking about the crystal caves and the way the humans had listened to her story. She was thinking about how good it felt to share something personal with others who cared about it. Continue working with them, Ambassador Krelto said. Try to teach them proper priorities. Perhaps you can make them more efficient. But as Zara walked back to meet the humans for their afternoon session, she realized she did not want to make them more efficient. She liked the way they asked about beautiful things. She liked the way they listened to her stories like they mattered. She liked the way they made her feel like she was more than just a collection of useful skills. The humans were waiting for her in the garden section of the ship. They had found a quiet corner where plants from different worlds grew together. James was looking at a flowering vine from the Delta system, watching the way its purple blooms opened and closed in response to the artificial sunlight. Dr. Vexithani, he said when he saw her. Look at this. The flowers are like they're breathing. Isn't that wonderful? Zara looked at the vine. She had seen it many times before, but she had always thought about its oxygen production capabilities and growth efficiency. She had never noticed the way the flowers moved like they were alive and aware. Yes, she said softly. It is wonderful. And for the first time in her adult life, Dr. Zara Vexthani allowed herself to look at something just because it was beautiful, not because it was useful. The feeling was strange and new and a little frightening, but it was also the best feeling she had experienced in a long time. The humans sat down among the plants and Zara joined them. They spent the rest of the day talking about favorite colors and foods and the kinds of weather that made them feel good. They talked about dreams and hopes and silly things that made them laugh. None of it was diplomatically useful. None of it would help with trade agreements or defense pacts. But Zara found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, there were more important things than diplomatic usefulness. Maybe the humans were right that getting to know someone as a person was the first step to any good relationship. As the day ended and the humans said goodbye, James paused at the door. Dr. Vexithani, thank you for sharing your stories with us. Tomorrow, would you like to see some pictures of Earth? I brought some images from our art museums and natural places. I would like that very much, Zara said, and realized she meant it completely. After the humans left, Zara stood alone in the garden. The purple flowers continued their breathing dance, opening and closing in rhythm with the artificial day cycle. She watched them for a long time, thinking about beauty and efficiency and the strange warm feeling she got when James smiled at her stories. Change was coming to the Harmony's edge, and Dr. Zara Vexithani was beginning to understand that some changes were worth making, even if they were not efficient. 2 weeks had passed since the humans arrived on the Harmony's edge. Dr. Zara Vexithani had spent every day with them, officially teaching them about galactic customs, but really learning more about herself than she had in years. The humans were unlike any species she had ever studied. They asked questions that had nothing to do with science or diplomacy. They wanted to know what made her laugh, what foods she liked, what her dreams were like when she slept. They shared their own stories freely, talking about their families and their fears and their hopes for the future. Zara had begun to look forward to these conversations more than anything else in her day. When she woke up in her small quarters, the first thing she thought about was what James might want to talk about. When she went to sleep, she thought about the way his eyes lit up when she told him something new about her world. This morning was different. Instead of meeting in their usual room, James had asked her to help him with a project in the ship's botanical garden. The garden was a large space filled with plants from dozens of different worlds, designed to provide clean air and peaceful surroundings for the crew. We're supposed to catalog some of the plant samples, James explained when she arrived. The council wants documentation of how different species plants grow together. Zara nodded and picked up a datapad. This was the kind of work she was used to. Scientific, useful, efficient. But as they moved through the garden together, James kept stopping to look at things that had nothing to do with their cataloging work. Look at this one, he said, pointing to a small blue flower that grew in clusters near the ground. It's so tiny, but the color is incredible. Like little pieces of sky. Zara looked at the flower. According to her data, it was a common ground cover from the Vega system, efficient at preventing soil erosion and requiring minimal water. But James was right. The blue was beautiful, bright and clean like the clearest part of a sky. The Vegan settlers plant these around their homes, she told him. They say the flowers bring good luck. Do you believe in good luck? James asked as he carefully took notes about the plant's growth pattern. Zara considered the question. My people believe in probability and preparation. Good luck is just the result of being ready when opportunity comes. James smiled. That's very practical. But sometimes I think luck is just the universe's way of surprising us with something wonderful. They worked their way deeper into the garden, recording data about root systems and leaf structures and growth rates. The lighting in this section was dimmer to protect the more sensitive plants. Soft artificial moonlight filtered through the transparent ceiling, creating a peaceful atmosphere that was very different from the bright meeting rooms where they usually spent their time. Zara found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did. The quiet garden, the gentle work, and James's easy conversation made her feel calm and comfortable. When she talked about the plants, explaining their biological processes and evolutionary adaptations, her natural enthusiasm for science came through in her voice. You really love this, don't you? James said as she described how the crystal plants from her homeworld converted light into energy through a process completely different from photosynthesis. Love? Zara paused, a small cutting tool in her hand. I find it intellectually satisfying. That's not the same thing, James said gently. When you talk about plant biology, your whole face changes. Your eyes get brighter and your voice gets warmer. You light up, literally. Zara looked down at herself. He was right. When she got excited about something, her crystal skin responded to her emotions by glowing softly. It was an automatic response that she usually tried to control in professional settings. But here in the dim garden, with James watching her with genuine interest, she had not been thinking about controlling herself. The bioluminescence is just a biological response, she said, but even as she said it, she knew it was not the whole truth. Maybe, James said, but I think it's beautiful. They continued working, moving to a section where Kepler crystal plants grew alongside earth ferns and Andromedan moss. The combination should not have worked. The different species had completely different needs and growth patterns. But somehow they had found a way to coexist, each type of plant adapting slightly to accommodate the others. It's like a little miracle, James said, kneeling down to examine how a crystal formation had grown around the roots of an earth plant without damaging it. They're all so different, but they figured out how to live together. Zara knelt beside him, studying the unusual root system. Her scientific mind was fascinated by the biological cooperation they were seeing. But another part of her, a part that was becoming stronger every day she spent with the humans, was touched by the metaphor. Maybe different species can learn from each other, she said quietly. James looked at her, and there was something in his expression that she had not seen before. It was warm and gentle and focused completely on her. I think they can. I think we are. They were very close together, both kneeling beside the same plant sample. Zara could see the details of James's face clearly. The way his brown eyes had small flecks of gold in them. The way his hair fell across his forehead. The way his breathing was slightly faster than normal. Her own breathing had changed too. The bioluminescence in her crystal skin was responding to emotions she did not fully understand, creating patterns of soft light that moved slowly across her features. In the dim garden lighting, the effect was subtle but beautiful. James reached out to take notes on his data pad, and his hand brushed against hers. The contact was brief and probably accidental, but it sent a strange warm feeling through Zara's entire body. She had never experienced anything like it before. Zara, James said softly, and she realized it was the first time he had used her first name instead of her title. The way he said it made it sound like something precious. She looked up at him and found him watching her face with an expression of wonder. The patterns of light moving across her crystal skin were reflected in his eyes, creating tiny galaxies of color and brightness. You're beautiful, he whispered. The words were so quiet that she almost thought she had imagined them, but the way he said them with such sincerity and awe made them impossible to misunderstand. He was not making a scientific observation about her species' appearance. He was not commenting on her efficiency or usefulness. He was simply telling her that he found her beautiful, as an individual as herself. Zara felt her entire world shift. In Kepler society, aesthetic appreciation was expressed through mathematical equations and formal analysis. Beauty was measured in terms of symmetry and proportion and functional design. No one had ever looked at her the way James was looking at her now, like she was something wonderful that he could hardly believe he was seeing. Her bioluminescence flickered wildly, patterns of light racing across her skin in response to emotions she had no names for. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into something vast and unknown and terrifying and wonderful. She started to speak, but no words came out. James seemed to realize what he had done. His face changed, becoming worried and uncertain. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I know that was probably inappropriate by your cultural standards. You were glowing, and the way you were talking about the plants, and you looked so beautiful," Zara whispered. "Yes," James said simply. For a long moment they looked at each other in the quiet garden. Around them, plants from different worlds grew together in impossible harmony. Above them, artificial stars twinkled in the simulated night sky, and between them, something new and fragile and important was beginning to grow. Zara had spent her entire life being valued for her intelligence, her efficiency, her usefulness to others. She had been praised for her scientific knowledge and her diplomatic skills and her ability to solve problems. But no one had ever looked at her and seen beauty for its own sake. The feeling was overwhelming. It made her want to cry and laugh and run away and stay forever all at the same time. It made her question everything she had been taught about what mattered, and what was important and what made life worth living. "James," she said, and her voice was barely audible. "In my culture, we do not speak of beauty the way you do." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry if I—" "No," she interrupted. "Do not apologize. I'm trying to tell you that what you said, no one has ever—" She stopped, unable to find the words to explain how his simple statement had changed something fundamental inside her. How could she tell him that 3 quiet words had made her see herself in a completely new way? "Thank you," she finally managed to say. James smiled, and the warmth in his expression made her bioluminescence pulse gently. "Thank you for letting me see it," he said. They finished their work in comfortable silence, both of them aware that something important had happened, but neither of them sure what it meant. When they were done cataloging the plants, they walked back through the garden together, past the breathing flowers and the singing crystals and the impossible combinations of life from different worlds. At the entrance to the garden, James paused. "Zara, would you like to have dinner together tomorrow? Not for work or cultural exchange or anything official, just because I'd like to spend time with you." Zara felt her crystal skin pulse with light again. "I would like that very much," she said, as she Wanus traveled fast on a spaceship. Within hours of the garden incident, every alien on the Harmony's edge had heard some version of what happened between Dr. Zara Vexthani and the human James Chen. The problem was that no 2 versions of the story were the same. Commander Brector of the warrior species heard that the human had made some kind of challenge to the Kepler female. The Braktar understood only strength in combat, so they assumed James was trying to claim Zara as a mate through dominance. This concerned them because they had not seen any display of physical power from the humans. The Drell, whose entire culture was based on trade and profit, calculated that James was trying to manipulate Zara's emotions for economic advantage. They began making charts about how emotional manipulation might affect future trade negotiations with both species. The Killion, who shared a group mind and thought as one organism, could not understand how individual aesthetic appreciation was even possible. They spent hours trying to figure out if James was speaking for all humans or just for himself, and what this meant for their collective decision-making processes. But it was Ambassador Kreltos who was the most concerned. He called an emergency meeting of the senior diplomatic staff that evening. "The humans are becoming a problem," he announced to the assembled aliens. "Their emotional instability is spreading to our own people. Dr. Vexthani has been behaving strangely ever since she began working with them." Dr. Vexthani sat in the meeting room, feeling uncomfortable as the other diplomats discussed her like she was not there. She had not told anyone exactly what James had said to her in the garden, but somehow rumors had spread anyway. "The human appears to have formed some kind of personal attachment to Dr. Vexthani," continued Ambassador Kreltos. "This is highly inappropriate and could compromise our negotiations." "What kind of attachment?" asked Dr. Mordun, a scientist from the insectoid Zephyr species. "Are we talking about a breeding partnership? The humans reproduce through pair bonding, do they not?" Zara felt her crystal skin flush with embarrassment. "It was not. We were just working together on plant samples." He made a comment about aesthetics. That is all. Aesthetics, repeated Ambassador Kreltos with disapproval. Dr. Vexthani, I hope you remember that you are here as a professional representative of your species. Personal feelings have no place in diplomatic relations. Of course, Ambassador, Zara said quietly, but inside she was thinking about the way James had looked at her when he said she was beautiful. She was thinking about how good it felt to be seen as more than just a useful tool. Meanwhile, James was facing his own problems. Captain Linda Rodriguez, the leader of the human delegation, had called him to her quarters for a private conversation that was not going well. James, what were you thinking? She asked, pacing back and forth in front of him. We're trying to make a good first impression on these aliens, and you're out there flirting with their scientists? I wasn't flirting, James protested. I was just being honest. She was telling me about her research and she looked so passionate about it. And the way her skin was glowing was just, it was beautiful. So I told her so. You told an alien diplomat that she was beautiful, Captain Rodriguez said flatly. Do you understand how that might be misinterpreted? Do you have any idea what kind of diplomatic incident this could cause? James sat down heavily. I know it probably wasn't appropriate by their standards, but Linda, you should have seen her face. I don't think anyone has ever told her something like that before. She looked so surprised, like the idea had never occurred to her. That's exactly the problem, Captain Rodriguez said. We don't know enough about their culture to be making personal comments like that. What if beautiful means something completely different to her species? What if you accidentally proposed marriage or declared war or something? I think beautiful means the same thing to everyone, James said quietly. I think all conscious beings understand the difference between being valued for what they can do and being appreciated for who they are. Captain Rodriguez stopped pacing and looked at him. James, I know you mean well. You always do. But we're not just individuals here. We're representatives of all humanity. Every single thing we say and do is being evaluated to decide if our entire species is worthy of joining the galactic community. James understood what she was saying, but he could not stop thinking about Zara. He kept remembering the way her bioluminescence had flickered when he spoke to her, like she was experiencing something wonderful and new. He kept thinking about how she had thanked him, and how her voice had been full of emotion she was trying not to show. The next day, the diplomatic meetings resumed, but the atmosphere was different. The other aliens watched James and Zara carefully, looking for signs of the personal attachment that everyone was talking about. Zara sat stiffly in her chair, trying to be as professional and impersonal as possible. James tried to focus on the formal discussions about trade agreements and resource sharing, but he found himself glancing at Zara throughout the meeting. She would not look at him directly, but he could see the way her crystal skin dimmed whenever Ambassador Kreltos spoke harshly about emotional instability and inappropriate behavior. During a break in the meetings, James approached her carefully. Zara, are you okay? You seem upset. She looked around quickly to make sure no one was watching them. James, I think it would be best if we kept our interactions purely professional from now on. Did someone tell you to say that? James asked. Zara hesitated. It is for the best. Personal feelings complicate diplomatic relations. Personal feelings are what make diplomatic relations matter, James said. Without personal connections, we're just trading resources and information. That's not friendship. That's not a real relationship between peoples. Perhaps friendship is not what the galaxy needs, Zara said, but her voice sounded sad as she said it. James wanted to argue with her, but Captain Rodriguez was calling for him to return to the formal sessions. He went back to his seat feeling frustrated and disappointed. The meetings continued for several more days, but the warmth and curiosity that had marked the early interactions between humans and aliens was gone. Everything became formal and cold and efficient. The aliens discussed humanity's application for galactic membership like they were evaluating a piece of equipment. The humans show technological promise, Dr. Mordun reported. Their innovation in medicine and engineering could be useful to the galactic community. However, added Ambassador Kreltos, their emotional instability presents a significant risk. They form personal attachments that could interfere with rational decision-making. They prioritize individual feelings over species benefits. James listened to them talk about humanity, like they were a problem to be solved rather than people to be understood. He thought about all the conversations he had had with Zara, about beautiful things and meaningful experiences. He thought about how excited she had been when talking about her crystal caves, and how much she had enjoyed sharing stories about her homeworld. Was that emotional instability? Or was that what made life worth living? On the final day of the evaluation period, the Galactic Council representatives gathered to make their decision about humanity's membership. James and his team sat at one end of the large meeting room, while dozens of alien diplomats discussed their fate. The humans demonstrate adequate technological development, announced Council Prime Minister Vex Kellen, a tall, elderly being from a species James had never seen before. However, there are concerns about their emotional volatility and their tendency to form inappropriate personal attachments during official proceedings. James felt his heart sink. They were going to be rejected, and it was probably his fault for telling Zara she was beautiful. Dr. Vex Thani, the Prime Minister continued, as cultural liaison to the human delegation, what is your assessment of their suitability for galactic membership? Zara stood up slowly. James could see that her crystal skin was glowing slightly, which meant she was feeling strong emotions. She looked around the room at all the assembled aliens, then her eyes found James across the space. For a moment she just stood there, and James could see her struggling with herself. He could see her thinking about everything she had been taught about efficiency and usefulness and proper behavior. But he could also see her thinking about crystal caves and breathing flowers and the way it felt to be called beautiful, just for existing. Honored council members, Zara began, and her voice was steady but not cold. I have spent considerable time with the human delegation, and I have observed behaviors that are indeed different from our standard diplomatic practices. James closed his eyes, preparing to hear her condemn humanity's emotional nature. However, Zara continued, and James opened his eyes in surprise. I have also observed something that I believe the galaxy has been missing. The room was completely silent. This was not the kind of report anyone had expected from the efficient professional Dr. Vexithani. The humans have a unique ability to see value in things that are not immediately useful, she said. They appreciate beauty for its own sake. They form connections based on genuine interest in each other. The council chamber fell silent after Dr. Zara Vexthani finished her unexpected testimony. Prime Minister Vexkalan looked around the room at the dozens of alien representatives, all waiting to see how the council would respond to such an unusual recommendation. Dr. Vexithani, the Prime Minister said slowly, your assessment of the humans is not what we anticipated. You were assigned to teach them proper galactic protocols, not to advocate for their emotional behaviors. Zara stood straighter, her crystal skin pulsing with steady light. With respect, Prime Minister, I was assigned to evaluate their cultural compatibility with galactic society. In doing so, I discovered that the question is not whether they can adapt to our ways, but whether our ways might benefit from adapting to include theirs. Murmurs spread through the chamber. This kind of challenge to established galactic culture was unprecedented, especially from someone as respected as Dr. Vex Thani. Ambassador Kreltos stood up, his forearms gesturing in agitation. Prime Minister, Dr. Vexithani has clearly been influenced by the humans' emotional instability. Her recommendation cannot be considered objective. Perhaps, said Dr. Mordun thoughtfully. The question is whether objectivity is always the best approach to understanding others. More surprised murmurs filled the room. Dr. Mordun was known for his strict adherence to scientific protocol. For him to question the value of pure objectivity was shocking. James watched from his seat, hardly daring to breathe. Captain Rodriguez had warned the human delegation not to speak unless directly asked, so all he could do was listen as his species' fate was debated by beings who had known about their existence for only a few weeks. Council members, Prime Minister Vexkalan announced, we will take a brief recess to consider these unexpected developments. Dr. Vexthani, please remain available for further questioning. As the aliens filed out of the chamber, Zara found herself surrounded by colleagues who wanted to understand what had happened to her. Some seemed concerned, others curious, and a few appeared almost angry. Zara, said Dr. Telemar, an old friend from her academy days, what has gotten into you? This emotional advocacy is not like you at all. Maybe it is like me, Zara replied. Maybe I just never allowed myself to show it before. Meanwhile, James approached her carefully. The room was still full of people, but most were focused on their own conversations about the dramatic turn of events. Zara, he said quietly. "Thank you for what you said in there. I know it couldn't have been easy." She turned to face him, and for the first time in days, she did not try to hide the emotions showing in her bioluminescent patterns. "James, what you said to me in the garden, it changed something important. I realized I had been living my whole life trying to be useful instead of trying to be myself." "And now?" James asked. "Now I think maybe being myself is useful in its own way," she said with a small smile. Captain Rodriguez joined them, looking worried. "Dr. Vexithani, I want you to know that if your defense of humanity causes problems for your career, we'll do whatever we can to help." "Thank you," Zara said. "But I believe I made the right choice regardless of the consequences." The recess lasted longer than expected. When the council members finally returned, Prime Minister Vexcalan looked thoughtful rather than decisive. After much discussion, the Prime Minister announced, "The council has decided to conduct an additional evaluation. Dr. Vexithani's testimony has raised questions about our traditional assessment criteria that require further consideration." James felt his stomach drop. More evaluation meant more time, more uncertainty, and more chances for something to go wrong. However, the Prime Minister continued, "This evaluation will be different. Instead of examining only technological capabilities and resource management, we will also consider what Dr. Vexithani has called emotional intelligence and its potential value to galactic society." The Prime Minister paused, looking directly at Zara. "Dr. Vexithani, the Council is creating a new position, Director of Interspecies Emotional Intelligence. Your first assignment will be to develop protocols for evaluating the emotional contributions of potential member species. Will you accept this position?" Zara's crystal skin flared with bright, surprised light. Yes, Prime Minister. I accept." "Excellent," the Prime Minister said. "Your first task will be to work with the human delegation to demonstrate how emotional intelligence can enhance, rather than hinder, diplomatic relations. You will have 6 months to prepare a comprehensive report." James felt a surge of hope. 6 months was not a guarantee of acceptance, but it was a chance to prove that humanity's emotional nature was a strength, rather than a weakness. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened on the Harmony's edge. As word spread about the new evaluation criteria, other aliens began to approach the human delegation with questions they had never asked before. Dr. Mordoon wanted to know about human art, and whether aesthetic appreciation had any practical applications. Commander Braktar asked about human concepts of honor and loyalty that went beyond simple alliance agreements. Even some of the Drell began inquiring about whether emotional connections between trading partners might lead to more stable and profitable relationships. Zara found herself busier than she had ever been, but also happier. Her new role required her to study something the galaxy had largely ignored: the emotional lives of its various species. She discovered that every civilization had art, music, stories, and traditions that went far beyond mere survival needs. But most had learned to hide these aspects of themselves in the pursuit of efficiency and technological advancement. "We've been so focused on what we can do," she explained to James during one of their regular working sessions, "that we forgot to ask what we want to do or why we want to do it." James smiled as he helped her organize data about different species' creative expressions. That's what makes life worth living: the wanting, not just the doing. Their relationship had evolved into something unique in galactic diplomacy. They were colleagues and friends, with a connection that was both professional and deeply personal. Other aliens watched them work together and began to understand that personal bonds could enhance rather than compromise professional effectiveness. 3 months into the evaluation period, Dr. Vexithani made a discovery that would change everything. While researching the historical records of various species, she found evidence that every current galactic civilization had once placed much more emphasis on art, beauty, and emotional expression. Over centuries of technological advancement and efficiency optimization, they had gradually abandoned these aspects of their cultures. "Look at this," she showed James records from the early Kepler civilization. "My people used to have festivals that lasted for weeks, celebrating the beauty of crystal formations and the music they made. We had poets and artists and dreamers. But as we became more advanced, we decided these things were inefficient distractions." James studied the ancient records with fascination. What happened to all the art and music? It still exists, Zara said sadly. Locked away in archives, forgotten by most of our people. We kept it for historical interest, but we stopped creating new works, stopped teaching our children to appreciate beauty for its own sake. This pattern repeated across species after species. The militant Braktar had once been known for their epic poetry and elaborate ritual dances. The commercial Drell had created beautiful mathematical art forms that expressed the aesthetics of perfect trade relationships. Even the hive-minded Kilon had once celebrated individual contributions to the collective through complex musical ceremonies. It's like the entire galaxy has forgotten how to be happy, James observed. Not forgotten, Zara corrected. We've been taught that happiness is inefficient. But the humans never learned that lesson. As Zara's research progressed, something unexpected began happening throughout the galactic community. Species that had not created art or music for centuries began to experiment with creative expression again. The crew of the Harmony's Edge started small cultural exchanges, sharing traditional foods and stories and songs. Dr. Mordun composed a scientific paper written in poetic verse. Commander Braktar taught the humans a traditional warrior dance that was both martial training and beautiful performance. Several Drell began creating mathematical art that was both functionally perfect and aesthetically stunning. But the most significant change was in Dr. Vexithani herself. As she worked with James to document the emotional intelligence of various species, she began to rediscover parts of her own culture that she had forgotten. She started visiting the ship's crystal garden regularly, not for research purposes, but simply because the light patterns made her happy. One evening, as she and James worked late in the garden preparing their final report, he noticed her skin glowing with particularly beautiful patterns. "You're doing it again," he said with a warm smile. "Doing what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Being beautiful," James said simply. "Just existing and being yourself and lighting up the world around you." 6 months ago, such a comment would have confused and frightened her. Now Zara accepted the compliment with grace and returned it with one of her own. "You taught me that," she said. "You taught all of us that being beautiful is not selfish or inefficient. It is a gift we give to others by